Okay, hi everybody, we're live. Welcome to our Google Chat with Mimi Zweig. This is Teaching Violin and Viola, Creating a Healthy Foundation. So Mimi Zweig is a professor of violin at the Jacobs School, Indiana University. She runs and started the IU String Academy as well as the Summer String Academy, and there she has her summer teacher workshop. And she's also the founder and creator of stringpedagogy.com, which is an amazing tool that I highly recommend everyone purchase, get online, join. It's invaluable. Mimi was my teacher when I was at IU, and she is still my mentor. And I was her student, her grad assistant, and then I was on the faculty at IU, and I worked with her. And occasionally I go back in the summer and teach at the String Academy and sometimes at the teacher workshop. And this course would not be possible without Mimi, so we're really glad that she is here. So welcome, Mimi.
Thank you, Stacia. Thank you to whomever is in the audience also.
Yeah, and we have our teachers with us, our team, Brittany, Caroline, and Jessica. So I'm going to start out, and I'm going to ask just Mimi a few questions, and then we'll let her talk a little bit, and then you all can type in all your questions that you would have for her. Even if you have the questions about our class, any technical issues, anything like that, she is here to answer your questions. So first, Mimi, who did you study with and where did you go to school?
I started to study the violin when I was 8 years old. So in our world today of starting kids at the age of 4 or 5 and parents thinking that, oh my gosh, 4 is already too late, 8 was when I began. Truthfully, I really wanted to play the piano, but my parents could not afford a piano, so they found a friend who had an old, beaten-up, full-size violin in their attic. And of course, not knowing anything about the violin or teaching or teachers, they strung up this violin, and I probably should have used it as a cello, but that was my first violin. Maybe that's why I love to play viola today. My first violin teacher was very inspiring. She was actually a visual artist, but played the violin as a vocation. Her daughter became a world-famous chef, Deborah Madison, who wrote the vegetarian cookbooks and had the Greens restaurant in San Francisco. So needless to say, when I would go to my lessons with Mrs. Madison, the smells coming out of the kitchen were amazing. And then after a couple of years, as what happens with our students is that Mrs. Madison sent me to another teacher. This was originally in Davis, California. At that time had a population of 3,000 people. So she sent me to Sacramento, which is the state capital of California. I had a really very excellent teacher in Sacramento. And I know because when I look at my Introducing the Positions by Harvey Whistler, the first words that are on the first page are practice slowly. The second week, it says practice slowly with 1 exclamation mark. And by the 3rd and 4th weeks, it's practice slowly. And you can see the pencil eating into that paper. So I'm sure she was trying her best to slow me down. So then briefly, my family moved to Syracuse, New York, where I studied with Louis Krasner, who was very well known for commissioning the Berg and the Schoenberg violin concertos, which he played also. Then I went to study with Raphael Bronstein at the Manhattan School of Music. And then after that's a long chronology, I studied with Samuel Kissel, who had been a member of the NBC orchestra under Toscanini, which dates me, as you can see, I'm quite old. But his teacher, his last teacher, was a man named Dunas, and Dunas was a very important teacher in for many people, especially professional people who would go to Dunas when they were already in the profession, asking specific questions. How do you hold the violin? How do you vibrate, et cetera, et cetera. So Mr. Kitzel was very important for me because he gave me a lot of information that I was desperately needing. After that, I ended up in Bloomington, where I've been for the last 40 years. My first year in Bloomington, I had the privilege of studying with Tadeusz Wronski, who was Poland's major pedagogue of that time. He had been a student of Gertler, who was a very famous teacher in Europe. Maybe not loved so much, but at least he was respected and gave correct information. So I'm just telling you all this because as we go through our lives, our line of information always has a source, and that source continues to grow as we add the leaves to this tree of knowledge. After Mr. Wronski, I can say that my major mentor here in Bloomington was Mr. Gingle. I didn't really study with him, but I observed many lessons, and he was my inspiration. There were a few years when I would be teaching Josh Bell and he would be teaching him also, and I would, of course, go to all of those lessons. So we had a very close relationship. And then, of course, as one grows older, one is constantly learning. And I try to make a point of every couple months adding another vital piece to this information of how to teach and how to play the violin.
So how do you do that? Like, where do you find your information, or do you decide you want to go down a certain path and you go looking for that or through someone?
I get a lot of information by going to different master classes, which, because I'm in Bloomington, I have this amazing resource and have had this resource of people from Starker, Gooley, Gingo, etc. And then also just in my own lessons with certain students that there will be a problem that I'll look at this student and I'll think, how am I going to solve this? What can I tell them that is going to help them be successful in managing this task?
Good. So I was going to ask you about your mentor. So do you feel that your main mentor was Mr. Gingold?
He was one of the major mentors. Wronski also was a very important mentor.
What do you think the most important things that you learned from Gingold and Wronski?
Wronski, what I learned from him was a sequence of etudes and scale studies, specifically the Kreutzer etudes, which all the people that have studied with me have gone through the same sequence, that every etude is used to accomplish a specific task that is then applied to the next etude, that it grows. So that by the end of studying Kreutzer etudes, one should have a very excellent grasp of how to play the instrument.
Mm-hmm. And what about from Mr. Gingold?
Mr. Gingold was the musical inspiration. I'll still use his fingerings, and every time I give a fingering or show a shift or a slide or a way to shape a phrase, I'll be thinking in the back of my mind, or I'll say, thank you, Mr. Gingle, for this wonderful wealth of inspiration.
Great. So you've had a lot of students come through there now. And so what are all your students doing out in the world now?
Truthfully, I don't know where all of them are, because as we all know as teachers, not all of them stay in touch, but many, many of them do. And the thing that is the most fun for me is that I'll get a knock on my studio door, and I'll open the door and I'll see an adult with 2 or 3 children and a wife and a dog and a cat in tow. And they'll say, hi, Mimi. And I'm thinking, who is this? Because I haven't seen this person in 15 or 20 years. And usually when they speak, I'll recognize the voice. But I am really fortunate to have had wonderful students who are now in different orchestras, who some of them are playing as soloists, some are concertmasters, many of them are teaching. Some of them have decided to do other things. Some became doctors or lawyers, or hopefully they're all making a contribution to this next generation that comes from a wealth of a background of music making.
Good. What do you think about the future of string pedagogy, especially with all this new technology and distance learning? Where do you see it going?
I have to say, this is the first time I've done a Google Hangout, so I think it's extremely exciting, and of course I have many ideas where it can go from here. Stringpedagogy.com, when it came out in 2002, was the first of its kind. It was extremely innovative, and it was the brainchild of Hideki Isoda. And for us as violin teachers, as all of us know, we want the best possible information and inspiration to become the best possible teachers. So I think all of these web-based tools, all of the YouTube films that we can access now. I used to have to go down to Sam Goody's in New York City when I was a student and wait in line to buy the first Heifetz recordings that were the new ones that were coming out. And that would be an all-day affair, because I'd have to save all the money to be able to go down and buy these recordings. Now all you do is turn on your computer, and everything is so easily at our fingertips, which has wonderful aspects to it, but maybe there's not enough of a struggle to look for this information. But I am extremely positive about all of the things that are available for us as teachers to access.
Yeah, it's great. I love using the YouTube and internet as a tool, especially for listening. And I love it that all the old guys are up there. You know, people are putting up all the old master recordings, so it's really wonderful for students to hear this. I think what we want to do next is we'd like to have people write in their questions for you. And I think that it would be, maybe you could talk a little bit before about the beginning stages, since this class is healthy, creating a healthy foundation, and how important and what you think about the beginning stages and setup of the violin.
The beginning stages, as your course proves, is so important, and the importance of this initial learning cannot be underestimated. Everything comes from those first lessons. Personally, myself, I wish I had had you as a teacher, because then I wouldn't have had to spend so many years figuring out how to play the violin. It's interesting to note that even by the end of Twinkle, I asked my pedagogy students, what have you learned by the end of Twinkle? And we can make a list of 25 things that are going to apply to the rest of our lives. For instance, how do we stand? How do we place the violin on our collarbone? How do we find the best possible balance for our bow? Initially, how do we react to a pulse? We're learning to read notes, rhythmic values by the end of Twinkle. We're learning how to play by rote, so our memories are getting into good gear. We're learning to play the first piece, Twinkle, by learning how the phrases are put together, which sets up the architectural structure of everything that is going to come next. And this is just the beginning. Also, learning how to practice. How do we practice? We practice difficulties and understanding that difficulties occur between two notes, and that practicing is just a matter of repetition. And the list can go on.
Yeah, that's right. Great. So, okay, good. I'm going to turn it over to our teachers here, and they have the questions that are coming in for you.
All right, I have the first question. Nikki asks, can you offer me any advice for how to move a book one student from using the upper half of the bow only to using the entire bow with a beautiful flexible wrist?
Yes, I can try to do that. So let me grab my violin. And you'll have to tell me if you can see everything here. And as you know from this course, the first pieces are played in the upper half of the bow. From Twinkle, we're already establishing the martelé, the détaché, and the legato stroke. And we're reinforcing those bow strokes in the upper half of the bow until O Come Little Children. And it's at O Come Little Children where we change the bow position from, let's see, can you see that, Stacia?
Yes.
Putting the thumb under the frog to placing the thumb in its normal position. Always being aware that we never press the thumb, that this tendon is always staying soft. Then the kids are doing 3 things to expand the bow. The first thing is we're doing our silent bow placements so that we get a feel for putting the bow in the 3 different places. We do our whole bow circle where we're circling around, and we're always following through on all of our motions. So we're circling. And then we're going to do bow wandering, where we wander down to the tip, and we wander back up to the frog. So those are the mechanical things. Now, if a student is having a problem getting to the frog, most likely there's excessive tension someplace in their body. So we want to check first the bigger places on our body, which would be the release of the ball and socket joint. We're aware that we use our forearm until it will not go any further, and then we need to use our upper arm across. And we can only do these things if we're hardly holding the bow. So as these kids are going through their development at whatever age, whether it's a Twinkle person, an end of book 1 person, if it's a Tchaikovsky person, a Paganini person, we're always reminding ourselves that we're visitors on the bow. We don't hold the bow. This stick is such an amazing invention that it can do most things without us getting in its way. So less is better.
Good. Next question.
Mimi, the next question is, to become a good teacher, do you think it's a good idea to have a mentor, especially when starting out? And in addition to that, I'd like to just add, what would you say some of the benefits of having a mentor as a starting teacher? What would those be?
Let's back up a little bit first. I think to be a good teacher, and we're most likely talking about good teacher for younger kids. One's own person needs to have a good grasp of the basic principles of violin playing. That means we have to have an understanding of bow strokes, of setup of the left hand, how we shift, how we vibrate, how we make a beautiful tone. Also, what is it to play a phrase, and what are the different styles of music, Baroque music, classical music, romantic music. These are huge topics that we all know. We start studying the violin at the age of 4 or 5 now, or as myself at 8, and these studies continue for many, 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 many years. I think once when a person decides that they want to be a teacher, I think it is saves a lot of years if they can find a mentor, if they can find a person that they want to work with themselves, a person that they can observe lessons of children. This is a very big assistant. My first teacher that I observed teaching children was Nancy Cradle, who was in the North Carolina School of the Arts the year that I was there, and the year that I didn't even know I was going to teach, but kind of got hooked by it. And actually after that, I was more or less on my own, except that I had a model of what I wanted to do. After I came to Bloomington, Betty Haig, all of you from Chicago are well acquainted with Betty Haig. She brought her students to Bloomington to play a concert. I was extremely young then, but I heard these kids play at this concert, and I had never heard kids play like this ever in my entire life. And I said, oh my gosh, these kids are amazing. And I said, this is what I want to do. So then I had to figure out my own journey and how I was going to develop a beginner student and how to get them through the beginning stages, intermediate stage. And probably the most difficult challenge for us as teachers is how to develop a child into an adult performer and into an artist. But definitely, yes, to find a mentor can save a lot of time. And just watch Stasia's course.
Okay. Next question.
So the next question is about the sequence of Kreutzer etudes that you discussed a little bit earlier. Have you published this sequence anywhere, or is it part of stringpedagogy.com?
It's part of stringpedagogy.com. The first 22 etudes are very specifically plotted out with videos, so it's very detailed.
Okay, good. Next question.
This is a follow-up. When do you recommend starting students playing the Kreutzer etudes? Are there etude books that you use before this one?
Yes, that's a very good question, because I am very sure that there is a sequence of events that will develop a young person. And if we follow a sequence of events, and it doesn't have to be my sequence, but the pivotal moments stay the same, then we can get through this sequence as fast as possible, which is what we want to do. So yes, so I can briefly outline that for you, and that is on my repertoire list, which is also on the String Academy website, Indiana University String Academy, or on stringpedagogy.com. In book 2, we begin with Wolfhart, Opus 45, book 1. We're doing scales from Twinkle with the Twinkle Variations, A major scale. We add an A major scale with half bows, whole bows at O Come Little Children. We add the D major scale at Allegretto Andantino. We add a G major scale with stop bows and slurs at Etude. So there's a whole scale sequence also that will lead from 1 octave scale, 2 octave scales to 3 octave scales, and eventually 4 octaves. After Wolfhart, when we've arrived at book 4, Vivaldi Concerto, we'll add the Introducing the Positions by Harvey Whistler, the book that my teacher adamantly said I should have practiced much more slowly. And then as we go into book 5, we'll probably add Wolfhart book 2, gets us into 3rd position. Then we're done with Wolfhart book 2. There is a really excellent set of 2 volumes that, again, Mr. Whistler put together, called Preparing for Kreutzer, book 1 and book 2. And at the same time, we'll be doing Schradiak, School of Violin Technique for left-hand finger dexterity. We will also be doing Josephine Trott double stops, melodious double stops. By the time we get through the Whistler book 1, book 2, Preparing for Kreutzer, we are ready for Kreutzer. And that can take, you can't really put a time schedule on how long it takes, but I can definitely tell you if a student is practicing more, they will move through this sequence faster. That's guaranteed.
Yeah, good. Yeah, and I think I've put on the site here several times that this sequence of repertoire and technique books is what I use, and it's fantastic. And so I highly recommend Mimi's sequence. Okay, next question.
Mimi, what would you suggest looking for in a student's playing of a specific piece to know when they are ready to move on and move forward to the next piece?
Mm-hmm. What I try to do is have a 3-tier system that the student will be playing a piece that they know really well, so they feel comfortable with it and they can get up and perform for all the relatives at whatever occasion without hesitation, and they feel very good about themselves. Then they should have also a piece that is pushing their level a little bit, so keeps them a little bit humble. And then they should have something probably that is a little bit more difficult, that they know that they haven't finished the journey, but no matter where they are in the journey, there's still a ways to go. I would like all the students, whatever their level, whatever their piece, to be able to play a piece from beginning to end with a steady pulse, or the pulse that the composer gives us, in tune with a beautiful tone. That's a lot. But that's what we ask of our students, whether it's Lightly Row or Two Grenadiers or Vivaldi Concerto, Haydn Concerto, etc. There's also a point where you can't beat a dead horse. So if you've reached that point with the piece, then I would recommend finding a piece that is at the same level or below that level to give a new perspective.
Good. Okay, next question.
The next question is, what brings a student from the beginner stage to intermediate and then from intermediate to more advanced? How and when do I amp up the demands to create this new level in students?
I think what we try to do, well, let me back up. Myself and my program here and Stacia and her team at Northwestern, our students come for private lessons every week and group lessons. The group lessons are so instructive because the children see other children playing at their level, above their level, below their level. But there's always something inspiring in those groups that pushes these kids to get where we want them to go. Also, we as teachers, whatever we're teaching, whether it's music or math or homemaking, we set the bar of expectations. If we set a reasonable expectation from week to week with our students, they will meet those expectations because kids want to please their teachers. They want to please their parents. If the student feels that we're on their team, that we're in there with them, that we're having a great time with them, and we take great joy out of their progress and their accomplishment, this will be the inspiration for them to get to the different levels. I can't exactly say to a student, okay, you've reached the intermediate level. Maybe when they're at Haydn concerto and they're playing Haydn beautifully, that could be an intermediate level. And then when they get to Kavalevsky concerto and after that Wieniawski concerto, we can say that's more of an advanced level. But these levels will only be obtained if we're constantly as teachers looking at the setup of our students, that all the physical motions are relaxed, that the bow is fluid, that there's a good understanding of the martelé, détaché, legato bow strokes, that we're aware that their tension in their head, their neck, and jaw is relieved so they can play with physical ease. Then it becomes a lot easier to get to the next level. I think it's really difficult to teach advanced repertoire to students who don't have a good basic physical setup and understanding of what principles we're talking about here.
Good. Next question.
Next question.
I have a question. How do you work to improve the intonation with young students?
Okay, that's a good question because intonation is something that we're listening for our entire life. It's something, unfortunately, that we can't get it right once and then we can forget about it. With the very youngest ones, we have tapes for them. I have no problem using props and bribes. I think anything that works is legitimate. So we'll put tapes on the little violins. Also, because we have such a hands-on approach with these youngsters, we're moving their fingers constantly into the right places so their ear will be attracted to the vibrations of the correct pitch. Now, as the student becomes more advanced, we have to ask ourselves, why do people play out of tune? Nobody chooses to play out of tune, and I've never met a person who doesn't hear as well as Hilary Hahn, who I think plays incredibly in tune. So then the question becomes, why aren't they playing as well in tune? as Hillary Hahn. Many times the reason lies in the setup of the left hand, that the hand is not balanced correctly, that there's too much tension in the left hand, that the fingers are not relaxing after they've been played. And another very large topic that we could make a whole MOOC out of is how to shift. How do we get from one place to the next place, keeping the hand in balance, which will help to guarantee that we can play in tune.
Good. Next question.
The next question is, if one gets a new student who has been playing for years but has multiple technical issues in both hands, what is the priority for getting the student on track, bow arm or left hand, or both simultaneously? And how do we avoid overwhelming the student?
Mm-hmm. This is really well stated in stringpedagogy.com, because there's a whole chapter called Establishing a Healthy Foundation, which we initially called it rehabilitation, but we decided against using that word since it probably has too many negative connotations. But yeah, of course, we all get students who are coming with many, many bad habits. I don't hesitate to start from the very beginning. And most of the time, the students are going to just be right in there with you, because by the end of the first lesson, they're going to hear that already they sound much better. So, very briefly, what are the first things we do? Just like the very first twinkle lesson, you have to set up the body in its most natural physical shape. You have to find a comfortable position for balancing position for the instrument. Many times we want to take a look at the chin rest, and I know Stacia spent a lot of time talking about different chin rests and shoulder pads and sponges, what to put on the back of the instrument. Psychologically, a crucial element in all of this is working in the non-judgmental environment, which is an environment where we welcome mistakes, where we allow ourselves to make mistakes, where nothing is good, nothing is bad. We just recognize the mistakes, and with many repetitions without anxiety, we'll correct those mistakes. So basically, we want to get our bodies physically set up. Then I begin the process with the bow, with the martelet stroke, with 4 martelets per bow, 2 per bow, 1. Then taking a look at the left hand, making sure the left hand is well balanced. Reiterating, relaxing the fingers after they play. And I do all of this with scales. If the student is at the Kreutzer etude level, I'll use Kreutzer etudes. If they're at the more beginner level, I'll use 1 octave scale, 2 octave scales, and I'll use Wolfart etudes. This is a very long topic.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Okay, good. Next.
So the next question is about rehabilitating a specific habit, on how you rebalance the left hand. If someone's left hand is so tight that it affects the reach of particularly the pinky finger, how can you change the setup of the left hand?
Okay, so Stacia, you can tell me if you can see my left hand here, but I can move so it can...
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so as you learned, and let me go get my pen here. Okay, so I'm going to give myself a magic X. Can you see that, magic X?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, okay. So we can take a look at a few things first. So we're going to take a look at the magic X here. But before we even do that, you have to make sure the student understands what it's like to be relaxed. So I'll take their hand and I'll just do a gentle handshake with them, so they have an understanding of what it's like to be relaxed. Now, we can't just feel that the hand is relaxed. We have to know that the whole arm coming from the ball and socket joint here has to stay very flexible and relaxed. So you can take their whole arm and just feel that this sensation is how we want it to be, being very malleable. So then if they can keep that feeling, then we'll just take a look at the things that might be wrong with the left hand. It could be that the magic X is too low. So then, this will sound really bad, by the way. This is, you see this position here? Is that a good angle, Stacia?
Yeah, come back. Maybe move back just a little bit so we can see it a little bit better.
Like this?
That's better, yeah.
Okay, well this magic X is too low. Or the magic X can be too high. So we have a distorted left hand here.
And can we see the side view as well?
Is that better?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me turn this chair here. Okay, or we can, most likely, what is not working with the little finger not being in the correct position is that we need to slide up and down on our magic X. And we have to slide up until our third and fourth finger are comfortable. And then we are going to extend back for the 2 and the 1. If my magic X is too far back, I'm going to end up with wrist pushed out. But if I slide up and I'm comfortable on my third finger and my fourth finger, then I can extend back for 2 and for 1. So that is probably going to be the biggest help for you. So making sure the little finger is loose after you play, the third finger is loose, second finger, and first finger. Other things that can be wrong is this angle here. Can you see this angle here?
Yes. Uh-huh.
So we see this very crooked wrist here. Now, this can happen for a couple of reasons. One, we want to take the angle of our first finger. And again, I'm going to put a little line. Can you see that line on my first finger here?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So that line, if I'm looking at my first finger, that is on the left side of my finger. So I don't want my first finger to be angled so the string is going to connect with it on the right side. But I want to keep it on the left side. Now, that's one thing to look at. The other thing is we have a different angle on each string because we're swinging from our ball and socket. So if I didn't swing from my ball and socket, I would have this angle here. So we find this angle comes up often when we're playing Song of the Wind. We get this, ooh, can you see, this distorted angle. We want to just make sure that the first finger is angled off with on the left side of the first finger.
Okay, good. Next question.
Okay. At what point is vibrato practiced in and of itself? We can see from the class that from the beginning we can help develop the looseness and motion, but when is it appropriate to integrate exercises specific to developing vibrato?
Usually that would come a little bit later. Vibrato is another interesting topic because the vibrato is the temperature and health and well-being of the entire body. What we find is we can listen to a student who comes to us for the first time, and they'll have one of these horrible, vibratos that, we think, well, we won't go into what we think, but what we find is that if we can get all the other things fixed, the physical stance of the body, the release of the bow, the left hand so that it's flexible and loose and free, and then, of course, the angle of the fingers, most likely the vibrato is going to be improved immensely. And sometimes we don't even have to say anything. But when we want to polish the vibrato, then we can go to the specific vibrato exercises, but I would do that later. And again, the most valuable vibrato exercise remains the exercise where the teacher is wiggling the student's finger.
Yeah, and this is always an interesting topic because, I know that I wiggle students' fingers and I'm making sure that they're relaxed, and I still have, a couple of students who I'm not happy with their vibrato. So, and I think that probably, that maybe it's not happening at home. And I think that it's really important to make sure that the parents know how to do this, and that they're actually really doing it with their students at home, with their kids at home every day, because if it's not happening very well, I doubt that they're practicing it every day. I mean, do you find that too, Mimi?
Yeah. We show the parents how to wiggle the fingers, and that is really very helpful. Just one word, that it's better in the beginning if the vibrato is slower, and it will speed up as the child grows up and gets a little bit older. But you also want to make sure that the student is hearing the pitch really clearly, and that the vibrato, the purpose of the vibrato is to enhance the pitch, not to distort the pitch.
Okay. Sorry. Okay, good. Next question.
Mimi, do you have older students, maybe from book 3 or so on? Do you have them review, and if so, how much?
I think the helpful thing in our group concerts is that we'll always pick some review pieces to do as a big group, and that means if it's being done if these pieces are being played in a concert, then we, the teachers, we will hear all of these pieces in their lessons also. So yes, I think it's really helpful to review not all of book 1 or all of book 2, but certain pieces. And this way, the students are also developing this incredible memory. I'm always amazed at how much some of at all of our kids, their capacity to memorize is to me just awesome.
Okay, good. Next question.
Well, this is one of my questions because I'm not seeing any new ones. How can we, as teachers, teach our students to practice effectively at home?
Well, practicing is simply a matter of repetition. So, if we can, we as teachers can give students specific things to practice, and then we'll say, you should repeat this 10 times or 25 times at home. And they can even check off in their practice books how many times they're doing each specific practice item. That is the biggest help. I think one thing that is very elusive, you tell a student, okay, you have to practice 1 hour. Well, a student doesn't know, especially if they're 7 or 8, for them an hour could be like an eon of years if they don't know what they're doing, or if they get totally into what they're doing by counting how many repetitions they need to do, the hour will go by very quickly. And it's not that they have to practice an hour. They just have to do the repetitions. And when they're done with the repetitions, they're done with practicing.
Good. Okay. Next question.
Okay, I have one of my own. I have students that, and I do this sometimes too, I'll raise my right shoulder without even realizing it sometimes. Do you have any exercises or thoughts or suggestions?
Yeah, so basically our right shoulder, we want to feel that we're moving the bow across with the flexibility of the ball and socket joint. So if I'm raising my shoulder, I've locked my ball and socket joint. So if I feel that I'm using my forearm, and then I can continue the motion with the upper arm, but it's moving across. Now, things that can help, you can hold your bow at the balance point and feel that you're moving across here. You also have to be aware that the ball and socket joint allows your arm to have its different levels, so it can be freed that way.
Good. Next.
I also have a question of my own. How involved do you ask your parents to be in the lesson? Do you ask them to take notes, record anything? I mean, what have you done in your experience, Mimi?
I ask the parents to sit very quietly and to take notes, and then to follow through. I can check their notes at the end of the lesson to make sure that they know very specifically what needs to be done in their daily practice with their child. The whole teacher-parent triangle, student-teacher-parent triangle is very fascinating, and we could go on quite at length about that. And actually, my good friend Shirley Bell is a real expert at talking about these things, and she may be on tonight, I don't know. But maybe you can get her online at one point. So in what we do, the role of the parent in the beginning is a necessity. But of course, as the student grows, there's a point where the parent is released of their duties, and we do this gradually. It's important that that the teacher is giving the information, and that the parent is not going to question the information per se, because that makes it very difficult for the child, whose allegiance, of course, has to be to the parent. But if the parent's saying one thing and the teacher's saying another, that could create a lot of problems. So I think for the most part, I have really, truly wonderful parents who are very supportive, and they'll be right in this process with their child, because it is fun.
Good. Next question, please.
So the next question is, how do you help the parents keep the violin in tune during the week? Do you teach the parents how to tune the instrument at the beginning, and when do you usually teach students how to tune their own violins?
Well, in today's world, it's very easy, because you can get an app. If you have a smartphone, there's an app called ClearTune. The parent simply has to match the pitch to the little needle that's going back and forth on ClearTune. And most violins for children are set up with fine tuners, which is a big help. And then as soon as we can, we of course teach the child how to tune their violin. It might take a while, though. Tuning with pegs is a whole different issue. The hands of students are so soft that it could be till they're 12 or 13 years old to be able to turn these pegs. Then with all the weather changes, pegs can slip and stick and all of these things. So sooner the better for the child to tune their own violin, of course. but it's not impossible to do that these days with all these wonderful apps.
Great. Next question. I actually have a question.
Yes.
Okay, I have two very, very tall boys with very long necks, and both of these kids I have had custom chin rests made, and so that we're raising it up on the top part of the violin. But the bottom part, we haven't found anything that can fill up the space. One of them, I think, uses a Mach 1, and one is using some other kind of the Brooklyn Bridge. And I know that you are totally against these. What do you do when you have somebody that has such a big space to fill up?
Well, let's back up a little bit. When we're dealing with children, children don't have necks. I've never met a child who has a long neck. Long necks come with adolescence.
Yeah, these are teenage boys.
Teenage boys. So there's a new chin rest out on the market called the Cradle, Kreddle. And I've had some good success with this one with boys with long necks. It can be built up higher, so you're building the chin rest up from the top, as you say, with these chin rests. And you can angle the chin rest forwards and backwards and to the side. So it can, for some of these kids with these long necks, it can be really comfortable. And then on the back of that, they actually put a sponge also. I would do a sponge that has some kind of softness in it, but can still add firm soft. And I've been really happy with that solution. And it's the old story that it's a different feeling of how to balance the instrument with the left arm instead of pressing down.
Right.
So my new thought for the last months has been the image of an air cushion between the whatever shoulder rest or no shoulder rest under here, so that there's like the hovercraft going from England to France, that we're always having some air under here. And that the jaws resting on the chin rest here, but it's like floating on the Dead Sea, so it can't go underwater. So a lot of balancing the instrument is going to come from keeping the arm, using the arm, just feeling comfortable using the arm.
Yeah, both of these kids started out that way. And then when they hit that growth spurt, and one of these kids is like almost 6'5". He's really, really tall. And I've tried everything, and we did build up the chin rest, but I can't seem to find the sponge that's big enough. And this seems to be what's most comfortable for them. One of them I'm not so convinced yet, but we still have some work to do.
I think part of it that you're saying that these are teenagers, so especially boys, they're building their muscles are growing, and just by definition, muscles growing are going to be tight, and they want to show their big muscles there. And probably maybe they're playing football at school, so they're being trained to tighten up their muscles instead of relax their muscles. So it's complicated. It's sometimes with boys at this age, you think, okay, I'll just see you in a couple of years. Come back.
Yeah. Okay, great. Does anybody else have any other questions?
Sure, I can ask one. This person has an adult student, and they don't think their setup is causing tension. And they struggle with performance nerves in lessons, and they have difficulty playing for their teacher. But they claim that they can play fine at home. What do you think that could be?
You mean the old phrase that everything sounded better at home?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Yeah, yeah. I think, again, I just go back to this non-judgmental environment that the student has to feel comfortable making a mistake because that's how they're going to learn. So as soon as they understand these principles of being non-judgmental, they'll do a lot better. There are some good books. The Inner Game of Tennis, Inner Game of Music are invaluable assets to understanding this process.
Good. Can you talk a little bit more about the things that we use in our program from you, your non-judgmental approach, and also learning through osmosis with the hands-on, and how you came about these ideas?
Well, we know that children don't have a lot of use for words, so we as teachers of very young children, we know if we sat in a chair 10 feet from them, they would be under the piano kicking and screaming, and that would be the last we would see of them for that half-hour lesson. So we create our entire environment for them using our senses, using their senses, which will be tactile. So we're shaping them and forming them with our hands. Visual, they're watching us, and we want to make sure that we focus their eyes and our eyes on them. And of course, oral, that we're singing for them, playing for them, they're listening to music. And that's how children learn efficiently. Now, as children get older, they start to intellectualize things, and they want to know how things are done, which means they'll try to take control of how to shift, how to vibrate, and by taking control, that creates a lot of tension. So we, of course, need the students to understand intellectually what they're doing, but we also have to make sure that all of these tasks are delegated to the body without so much interference from our brain, because we need our brain to think about the music and the phrase and the style, and are we playing together with the piano, etc.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I can't overemphasize the importance of being non-judgmental. Being judgmental can cause so much tension, and the tension will be most evident in a performance, and that's when we need to be the loosest, the freest, etc.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. So we're a little bit after 9 o'clock. Do we have any other last questions for Mimi? Okay, good. I think that we're finished with our Google Hangout here, and I really want to thank Mimi Zweig so very much for being here. It's been wonderful, and we really appreciate you taking the time to share your wealth of knowledge with us. So thank you, Mimi.
Thank you, Stacia and the team. It was a pleasure.
Okay, good. So thanks everybody out there for showing up and for your questions. And we'll see you this week in class and online. And I think our next Google Hangout is going to be with Brenda Brenner. And I think it's November 2nd. We'll probably be adding a couple more. I know that we'll add another one for to talk more about specific things that are going on in the course, your questions about pieces and specific techniques and things like that. So we will let you know when we schedule that. So anyway, everybody have a wonderful good night, good day, wherever you are, and we'll see you this week. Thanks. Bye.